This week we'll be looking at two often confused figures of speech. Both of them are used where you are substituting a word for something else. Metonymy comes from the Greek word metonymia, which means a change of name. So you are simply substituting one name for another name. So for example, we talk about the White House has introduced a number of policies, and we don't really mean the White House. What we mean is the American government. Or in South African context, we talk about Pretoria has announced. We don't mean that the city has announced, we mean that the government of South Africa has announced. So that's metonymy, the substitution of one term for another. Synecdoche comes from the Greek term synecdoche, which means substituting a whole for a part, and it's used vice versa as well. And this is usually used when we take a part of something and we then refer to the whole, or the other way around. So for example, when we talk about I've got a new set of wheels, what I mean is I've got the car, not just the wheels, a part of the car, but the whole car. Or if we say it's time for all hands on deck, what we mean is all the crew, all the people. They're hands, part of them, but it's standing for the whole person, must step up and do the task. So let's break that down a little further and look at the use of each. They're very easy to confuse, but if you just remember that synecdoche is really about part and whole, and metonymy is really about substituting one term for another, where it isn't really a part or a whole or something. Let's break it down a little bit and look at some practical examples. So if we look at this sentence, the Crown has urged Number 10 not to pursue a boots on the ground policy. Pause this video for a moment and try to identify any examples there of metonymy or synecdoche. So pause now, try and make those identifications, and then hit unpause and we'll analyze it further. Okay, great. So how did you do? Well, there are actually three examples here. One of them, two of them are metonymy and one of them is synecdoche. Were you on the right track? So I think a fairly obvious one, the crown. Now the crown obviously is something worn by a king, so the crown substitutes for, it stands in for the king. So the crown here means the king. So the King of England, Charles, for example. So the words the crown are standing in for British royalty. So it's substituting one term for another, that's metonymy. And in a very similar way, Number 10 stands in for Number 10 Downing Street, which is the seat of the British government. So if the Crown is the king, Number 10 means the Prime Minister, the cabinet and the Prime Minister's office. So that's a fairly obvious example of, again, metonymy, because one term is simply substituting for another. Number 10 is not part of the government. Rather, it substitutes for, it stands in for. Now let's look for further in the sentence to see if we can spot any synecdoche. So, pursue a boots on the ground policy. Now, boots on the ground is a term often used to refer to soldiers. So soldiers wear boots, the boots are part of the soldier, and it's standing in for the part. The boot is standing in for the soldier. So the British royalty here is urging the government, the British government, not to send soldiers to put boots on the ground, to put soldiers on the ground. So that boots, part of boots on the ground, is synecdoche. A part is standing for the whole. So how did you do? Let's have a look at another example, and again I'll put it on the screen. You pause and try and figure it out. So pause the video here and try to identify which of these sentences is metonymy and which is synecdoche. Okay, let's see how you did. So the first two sentences are examples of metonymy. Pen substitutes for literature and sword substitutes for the world of action or violence. So writing about something, thinking about something, the intellect is stronger than, might is right, using your sword to settle an argument kind of thing. And the same with head. Head stands for business, acumen, for intelligence. So she has a good intelligence for business. It's not really about a part of the whole. It's about it standing in for. So metonymy is often used with more abstract ideas. However, when South Africa came third in the relay race, that is the whole country standing in for the South African team, the team that represents it. So there we have a whole standing for a part. So, synecdoche. So I hope this has made it clearer. It is tricky because you might argue, for example, well, the crown, okay, it stands in for British royalty, we get that part, but isn't crown kind of like a part of the king? So isn't it the part representing the whole? Just like the boots on the ground were a part of the soldier representing the whole, and that was synecdoche, right? Yes, it can be quite tricky, but you've got to think of it more in terms of what work is it doing in the sentence. So metonymy is, and the examples that you will find online if you look for examples, they will all be about things like the Kremlin represents the Russian government, the pen represents literature, the sword represents the world of political action and violence. So one idea is representing another. It's not really about the whole or the part. Whereas all hands on deck, the hands of the sailors represents the sailors themselves. The part represents the whole. The USA came first in the Olympic Games. The whole country represents the part, the squad that went. If you think about it more that way, you'll be more accurate. Don't worry too much. I mean, synecdoche is kind of like a category of metonymy. So it's not absolutely crucial, but obviously you're going to find it in tests and things like that to test your general knowledge. But they do very similar work, which is why I've dealt with them in this single video. So good luck. It can be tricky, but I hope this video has helped.